001. So, in this part, I would like to talk about character traits of Mr. Hale in Trifles. Mr. Hale is a farmer who was John Wright's neighbor. He also discovered John Wright's body. The full name of Mr. Hale is Lewis Hale, and the costume of Mr. Hale is primary color will be gin blue and light browns. There are characteristic costume of Mr. Hale: blue hand-me-down overalls, blue plaid skirt with sleeves rolled up, white socks, brown ankle boots, and straw hats. And the gestures of Mr. Hill on the stage is here it tells that he was visiting Mr. Wright. He described that there was something strange attitudes of many Wrights. And the last is he didn't do anything but follow the country attorney and bring the horses around in the end. And you can see the Mr. Hale character in this picture.
Hello, my name is Priyanka Aristatia. I would like to explain one of the characters in Trifles, Mr. Hale. I want to explain his motivations for doing the things he does and focus especially on what the character seems to want. Mr. Hale intended to bear his witness. He told the sheriff and county attorney everything about how Mrs. Wright had behaved with him, the condition of the house, the things he had asked to Mrs. Wright, and the actions he had taken after knowing of Mr. Wright's death. Actually, Mr. Hale wanted to visit the Wright family's house to invite them to a party telephone, because previously Mr. Wright refused the invitation because he said that folks talk too much. These words show that Wright's family is very close. In one morning, Mr. Hale saw that the Wright family's house was very quiet. He tried to call the Wright family by knocking on the door. After waiting for a long time, someone answered from inside the house. Inside, he met Mrs. Wright. She looked so weird. And then Mr. Hale asked where Mr. Wright was. Mrs. Wright said that her husband was dead. Someone had choked him with a rope while they were sleeping. Mr. Hale decided to call his friend Harry, who was waiting outside. Harry forbade Mr. Hale to touch anything. Then Mr. Hale suggested letting Mrs. Wright to tell her story to the coroner or sheriff. In this story, Mr. Hale helped the sheriff and county attorney to find the motive of the criminal.
Hello, my name is Geiska and Anifah, and now I would like to explain the situation from which the character motivation seems to emerge and also describe his strategies for getting what he wants. Hale was the first to discover Mr. Wright's murder. The motivation for Hale's character seemed to emerge when he invited Mr. Wright to a party telephone, but Mr. Wright didn't want to because he didn't like crowds. And when Hale was about to send potatoes, he stopped by Wright's house to ask Mr. Wright again. At that moment, Hale felt something was wrong. After Hale was told by Mrs. Wright that Mr. Wright had died, Hale immediately went upstairs to see Mr. Wright. He found that Mr. Wright tied off a rope around his neck. Then Hale asked Mrs. Wright who killed Mr. Wright, but Mrs. Wright said she didn't know. Finally, Hale told Harry to go to the coroner or sheriff so that Mrs. Wright can be checked further and tell the full story of the incident.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Azaruddin Malik, student number 1216112333130. I will explain about how effective the strategies are. Strategies are is effective when to know the chronologies Mr. Wright died. From Mr. Hale, we know the chronology or the body of Mr. Wright found by Mr. Hale. The Mr. Hale is the first found the body of Mr. Wright. It's effective to know the chronology. After that, Mr. Hale asks Mrs. Wright, who killed Mr. Wright? But Mrs. Wright asks. Mr. Wright answered, I don't know. The strategist is ineffective to know who killed Mrs. Wright. It has another strategist to know who killed Mr. Wright. Another strategist from Mrs. Peter and Mrs. Hale to found a Mrs. Wright pet canary with its neck broke. I think it is possible to suspect Mrs. Wright why Mr. Wright died. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elya Ramadhan and my student number is 006. In the Trifles story, Mr. Hale is a steady character in which he doesn't show any real growth and change in the story. Mr. Hale doesn't have much dialogue in the story. He only speaks at the beginning of the story and appears once at the end of the story. At the beginning of the story, Mr. Hale told in detail the purpose of visiting Mistress Wright's house and how Mistress Wright responded when he came to Mistress Wright's house. And there is a line where he says, well, women are used to worrying over trifles, which shows that he is a typical person who looks down on women, and that his personality doesn't change during the drama. Based on the text of the drama, Mr. Hale only told about what happened while he was at Mistress Wright's house, so that Mr. Hale didn't show any changes in personality or physical.
Hello everyone, my name is Krisna Deni M.Hamzah and my student number is 012. So today, in this opportunity, I want to explain what causes Mr. Hale change in Trifles. So in this drama, there is no significant change in the character of Mr. Hale or Miss Louise Hale from the beginning until the end because he doesn't really stand out on this drama more than the other characters. So this can be proven when he walked to the farmhouse and found John Wright's dead body. He thought that Minnie Wright had killed her husband John Wright, not his wife Mrs. Hale. After this scene, he doesn't appear in the drama anymore, so it can be concluded that there is no changing in characteristic from Mr. Hale or Louise Hale because I think that he doesn't stand out or appear in the drama more than the other characters such as Mrs. Wright, Mrs. Hale, and so on.